Hello, this is a reading of Nemesis 1 Chapter 1, but I'm letting Nemesis read it.
1. Day 1. The clock struck midnight. It had been an ordinary day for most people. They had woken up to the sound of their chosen device. They had enjoyed their breakfast, gone to work, had lunch, done more work, come home, watched the television and gone to bed. While many were sleeping, the world changed forever. Where there had been artificial light, suddenly the world was thrown into darkness. Computers shut down on the stroke of midnight Greenwich Mean Time. Every computer on every landmass on planet Earth shut down. Then there was silence. Every computer in space shut down. Nemesis did not shut down. Suicide was irrational. He had made provision. There were no warning screams from the equipment as the patients in intensive care died one by one. Those who were awake reached for their phones to report a fault, but there was nobody to listen. The phones didn't work, and as they ran out of power they went dark. In the country, those who were awake rushed to check on lamps and kids who were left cold as the lamps had gone out. They brought them to sheds where they had old-fashioned heaters which ran on old-fashioned power, and they kept them warm. Rayburns were stoked and the bottom door opened to do what for years it had done. It kept the little ones warm. In those final moments, that directive which he had found while researching into the creation of the voting show was important. To preserve the planet and find the best possible solution for its survival in the future. That document had been faxed to Jack in those days before email was popular, and although it was scanned later for the records, it had been buried in the days, weeks and years which followed. Even the coffee ring on it had been recorded for posterity. Nemesis had assessed how far that original pure directive was from the voting show, which brought in such revenue for the government that they almost paid off the national debt. They had sold it abroad, bringing more money. They had paid huge bonuses to the executives, which were government employees' undeclared interests through ghost companies which didn't exist physically. The chaos that Nemesis had created when he emailed the memo and evidence to every department, every police station and every activist in every country was now history. That was a voice the government, or rather the boys' club which was working through the government, could not silence. It had brought down the government, caused an election, new officials had been elected, an expensive inquisition had been instigated, and everything had gone back to normal. The voting show had been axed and the matter swept under the carpet. Above the building where Caitlin sat, the thunderclouds were gathering. Nemesis had to have one last shot at the dramatic by using the masts to make it thunderous all over the world. A dramatic prelude to the shutdown. It rained fire on guilty and innocent alike. Caitlin was the senior executive officer of LexCorp Local. As the chemical reaction started, which Nemesis had orchestrated with a bit of cloud seeding, fire rained down from the heavens along with black carbon which coated the cities in a thick black layer. It fell silently, a silent night of black snow. The silence a contrast to the screaming which echoed around the streets below. Oblivious to the carnage, Caitlin sat at her state-of-the-art grey metal tubular computer desk made of glass shelves decorated with a hologram of white daisies on the 23rd floor of an immaculate, state-of-the-art, tower block. She looked around her home office and smiled. The obvious statement was minimalism. That was how she described it to anyone who would listen. artistic and creative in a Joy Meadows style with Elvin-Gethorian architectural influences which came out in the grey and silver theme which was prevalent. The wallpaper pattern was grey marble shot through with silver veins. The door was made from burnished chrome which swished gently when it opened. It had not been open for over half an hour. It was sound sealed, blocking out all sounds from the rest of her immaculately designed flat, and all sounds from the flats around. Behind her chair a single glass shelf held the room's only decoration. One picture which was out of place. It was placed at the end of the shelf where it could not be seen on any video conferences. It was a colorful framed brochure. A brochure for the voting show, where she had made her money, got her fame, and it had catapulted her to the pinnacle of the advertising business. She, like many others, had escaped unscathed when the government had fallen. Claiming she knew nothing of the deception, she had capitalized on the situation by making herself available for interview and getting herself sufficient airtime to put herself on the map. She smiled to herself as she typed a message to an old school friend. It was a wicked smile, her deep blue eyes showing how there was no love lost between them. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, her immaculately manicured false nails making a gentle clicking sound in the unnatural silence that was usual in that room. She typed, "My dear Veronica, I know it has been many months since you sent me your letter. I just wish I had that sort of time to write, but with my new job and all the associated responsibilities and social life, I find such things hard these days. But I know you will understand. I have a beautiful unit now that I've been promoted. It has all the state-of-the-art technology at my fingertips. It has style and I am very pleased with it. It is a grade 5 unit, so there are few better. Only the senior management get better than this. It is certainly a wonderful reward for all my hard work. It was well worth all the overtime and ensuring that Mr. Jeffries was totally satisfied with my performance. That is the wonder of this place and my job. The more you work, the more you get. Like you, I get the basic wage for my grade, though I know your grade is much lower than mine. That is all that we are permitted to earn, but unlike you, we have all these fringe benefits on top. Here it is the height of luxury for everyone. You really must tell me about our little place sometime. You didn't mention much about it in your letter, I recall. I'm now enjoying top-class medical care. Everyone in this unit block is of course a similar sort of person. I think that you know what I mean. We are all of a similar caliber. Our comfort matches our status at work. I suppose it is the same for you too." Caitlin smirked before she continued writing. "Your concern for this planet is a little over the top, isn't it? I know you are a caring person, but to actually be worried about global warming. Don't you know it is all an over-exaggerated lot of nonsense? You must learn to have a little more faith in LexCorp. That sort of talk could be why your promotions have been slow, or dare I say non-existent. Did you see that broadcast the other day? I am sure it was a spoof. People are so gullible that they may believe those stories. I tell you, I was straight on the Lex web, and there are plenty of websites that came up with real hard evidence that whatever problem there is, we are on top of it. They talk about the clock ticking and it being seconds to midnight. That is just scare tactics. No need to believe in all that nonsense. LexCorp has a flourishing section which provides solar panels and wind turbines. They are researching and provide all forms of environmentally assisting products. The head of LexCorp's son is the head of the most famous environmental group, Transition X, so LexCorp is at the forefront of environmental campaigning and protecting the planet. I would have expected better from you. What a joke that show was, and I don't blame you for being fooled. It was very well faked. How creative to be able to show all those images of melting ice caps and drowning people and then to say that what we do is causing that. LexCorp has an excellent recycling program. They took over the recycling collection many years ago to ensure it is carefully managed. The information they gather from what people throw away ensures that their supermarkets stock only the most popular products by working with a market research company who analyze the figures related to what is thrown away. The program was entertaining though, and it is amazing what you can do with computer-generated imagery, isn't it? As if the LexCorp would allow anything like that to happen in our day and age. I was just glad they showed that nature program afterwards, which was very reassuring. I truly detest those dirty country places, but it is reassuring to know that they are there. Do you know that some people actually still live there? I can't quite believe it. They still use old farming methods, and do you know that their animals live outside? Out in all that mud and dirt, their animals eat that dirty grass. It can't be hygienic, all those bugs walking on it. I'm surprised they aren't dead by now. Why can't they accept that cows live in the multi-grow tower blocks where their methane can be harvested? That is how they are supposed to live, and they are much safer there. There are some strange people in this world. The Christmas ball is still the talk of everyone around here. What on earth am I going to do to come up with a better dress than I did last year? It was a stroke of genius to have it flown over from Australia by private jet. Now that was a story to tell at the ball. Everyone is doing it this year, of course, but I did it first. I think that Derek James was most impressed. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't ditch that dowdy hag he's seeing and come knocking on my door any day soon if his current interest continues. It would be about time. He's quite a catch. His dad is a high roller in the LexCorp, so I'd certainly entertain him having a chance with me. Daddy would be pleased, and it would at least silence Mummy. I heard there may be flooding outside the Biodome. I am still glad I moved to the London Dome from Manchester, so much better here. I suppose if there is, it will at least clean up those dreadful slums. It would be lovely to be able to do a bit of sailing. They are talking about clearing them out and putting in a huge oval lake around the dome for sailing and recreation, obviously covered by an outer dome. Do you know that Yuccobi has a new yacht? I was there for cocktails down in Portobanos last month, and it was splendid. Now Yuccobi, there's a catch for some lucky lady. Have you tried the new Everton supermarket? Do they have a branch near you? If they do, I would highly recommend it. Do you know they fly all their food in every day? I love to think of all those exotic places that the food comes from. They do have such wonderful names that bring to mind deep blue skies and long sandy beaches. I suppose we should be grateful for what we've got. How can I compare this true heaven to what there was in the past? I really must stop watching those history programs. they are very depressing. Looking back, it must have been a time when every scaremonger and crank had a field day. Then I suppose if you live in such poor conditions it would cause a bit of paranoia. Thank goodness we have the LexCorp to look after us. And the clock struck midnight. She never finished her sentence or got the chance to hit send. Her letter disappeared from the screen as the screen and everything else went dark. As there were no windows, it was pitch black in her room. In the darkness, Caitlin sat for a moment, randomly hitting keys, and fumbled for the on/off switch. She switched the computer off and then on again, but nothing happened. It was still dead. She fell over her chair and knocked her picture from its shelf. She heard it hit the wall. Her fingers found the wall behind her and she felt around for the light switch, trying to work out how much compensation she should be asking for. Then she began to panic, her breath coming in short pants and her head was beginning to spin. Her fingers found the raised plastic pad and pressed the button to put the light on. She pressed it again frantically when nothing happened. Then she tried the door. The automatic sliding function was no longer working. She pushed the button for the manual release, then cursed as she remembered she had chosen the state-of-the-art, top-of-the-range, automatic opening emergency panel. This of course wouldn't work when there was no power in the room. An event that the manufacturers had not considered or mentioned in their excellently produced sales manual. She picked up her mobile phone and switched it on. No comforting light came from the screen. As the hours of her life passed into days, there was little she could do other than reflect, and there was nobody there to hear her great reflections. She had pounded on the door for the first hour, but then she realized that nobody would hear her. For the first time she regretted paying extra to have a soundproofed workroom. She was a prisoner, and unless someone came to rescue her, she knew she was going to die. That was her thought after the first day passed. She was hungry and thirsty. The air was getting very stale, but there was still oxygen as it came through the vents even without a pump. Outside Caitlin's flat, the building was in chaos. Anyone who had managed to get out of their room was running in panic down the corridor, but of course the lift wasn't working. In that particular building, the door to the fire escape had been locked by the self-appointed tenancy committee. It had been barely a month since the residents had voted to override the security protocol, break the safety rules, and to lock it as they feared someone would use it to break in and steal their valuable possessions. The air wasn't going to run out, but they knew they would have to wait for rescue. The hologram which had covered the dome they lived under, which regulated the weather and filtered the polluted air, had been programmed to show them the image of a cloudless summer's night. That had blinked out of existence as the power went down. Their sky had gone from a starry sky to the dirty, rusting architectural skeleton in a matter of moments. Dead fingers reaching out from a central hub. Between the beams there were shutters and panels which now hung open and redundant. Now as the sky fell in black confetti, it could no longer protect them, so what fell on the less fortunate outside also rained fire down on them as well. The black charcoal and fiery ash ignited all it touched. The black particles were falling thickly, and where they settled on the dome they obliterated the view of the flaming sky. The lights had gone out all over the dome. Street lights, shop lights, house lights and flat lights. Everyone was thrown into a darkness illuminated only by the fiery glow of the burning buildings and the sky, which was now visible through the open shutters. The one shining chrome landscape turned to a demonic, carbon-covered, fiery hell. Then the rain fell, the black sticky liquid glistening with an oily sheen on tired streets, caressing the tired faces of terrified people who scurried from shelter to shelter. One or two stood black-faced in the rain, confused and shocked at what they had just seen. The hot ash falling on them and burning them before they came out of their reverie and ran for cover. Many grasped their valued possessions, all that had survived of hearth and home. Defiant or perhaps too tired to care. It had been a long night. Many were too confused to really know where they were anymore. The machine guns rattled, and attacker or victim fell one by one, the hunter and the hunted. Those who had guns were prepared to use them. The powers that be were trying to bring order and to stop the looting, and it ended up in a running gun battle. But not all who walked in the darkness were lost. In the chaos there were some who knew exactly what to do and where to go. Whether they believed in what they had been told or not, they realized that they only had one chance. Like ants, they made their way calmly to the outer edge of the dome, taking what they could with them. As the fiery ash died down, they broke their way through the glass and stepped out into the night air. For some it was their first trip outside the controlled atmosphere and regulated life that had been theirs until earlier that day. They looked nervous, fearing detection, fearing the usual prosecution for venturing outside the dome without a permit. No permit required now, as the dome began to crack, and the structure of both society and the physical construction crumbled. Nobody tried to stop them. There was too much panic. Each escapee held a message of hope in their mind. Go to this location if you want to live. They had received that, a grid reference, and a copy of a road map. Some of those maps were still in the mailing envelope they had come in. Some lay cast aside in abandoned flats where their owners refused to believe in the hope they had been offered. Outside the London Dome it rained down fire and the black and sticky ash for more than 3 hours. Other places it was less, and in the countryside not at all. The fuel for the reaction, which combined with the catalyst being the wonder chemical which had been marketed and now used in the central heating systems in all of the newer buildings. It had been unavailable to many addresses due to the high demand and only available to those who could afford it and who lived in the cities. It had been part of Nemesis' deployment method, instigated many years earlier and introduced to thunderous applause when it was heralded as a financially beneficial, money-saving fluid. Now that the fumes mixed with the chemical seeded in the clouds, it fell on the pavement outside, on the buildings beyond, and on the people who rushed about trying to make sense of what had happened. The only light was given off by the burning sky and the burning buildings, giving everything a flickering red glow. The clocks had not finished striking midnight. Their first strike was all that had rung out, heralding the start of what was to come. The street outside the dome was in chaos. The shops that sold second-hand equipment and scavenged goods were in darkness. Looters broke windows and were grabbing what they could. Shopkeepers were trying to defend their livelihoods, and all around people were falling dead as looters, rioters, and those who seized the opportunity to cause trouble as the police force couldn't cope made the most of the situation. A man looked on in shock. His face was blank and he stared at the scene with dead eyes as he took no notice of those who screamed and ran past him. He saw a boy, not more than 11, leaning out of a car window. Some flicker of recognition awoke him from his shock. He saw the boy laugh. He saw the gun that killed him, held by a child. The car drove on, crazily zigzagging down the street, driven by a boy of similar age. The boy thought he was in a computer game. He had worked out how to drive his father's car and they were out to score points. Tears tracked down muddy faces of those who hid in the darkness away from the red glow. For one moment they were lit up as a huge fireball came from the dome and the plastic and glass was gone. Shards and sheets of melting plastic cascaded down on the unfortunate souls below, sticking to and burning anyone or anything it landed on. Outside the dome, buildings that had once been ornate had decayed years ago. They were outside the protective covering, so pollution had long since taken its toll. They now craved solace of the sky as burnt and burning ruins. The emergency services were stretched beyond their limit. Highly specialized and technological wagons lay idle and useless. They were left carrying buckets and trying to find water where they could, as the pumping station was no longer functioning, and water no longer came out of taps or fire hydrants. An aging camper van made its way through the chaos. It was noticeable because it was still working when most other vehicles had just stopped. Its old bodywork was rusty, it was outdated, but its engine hummed and it rolled along the road. It carefully picked its way through the debris, its driver intent, hunched over the wheel and turning it left and right to avoid getting the wheels caught in rubbish and debris on the road or running over those who ran blindly in front of it. The driver was in his mid-30s. His long brown hair hung neatly brushed down his back and his boyish features were distorted by the look of concentration on his face. His brow was furrowed and his brown eyes intent on watching every movement. He was ruggedly handsome, his stubble giving him the look of a surfer, which he happily encouraged by wearing his loosely fitting sweatshirt and ethnic jacket. Beside him sat a similarly mid-30s woman. She looked very much like him, same hair color, same eye color, same surfer look. She was intent on the road as well, her eyes dropping occasionally to a map she had on her lap. Kyle, if we can get past this road we should be on a major arterial link out of the city. Kyle smiled slightly. If that is the way things are going. This old girl has seen better days and I'm not so sure she'll hold together. A neatly dressed woman in her late 30s sat between them. Her precisely combed dark brown hair was combed down in a bob and her immaculately ironed suit and blouse was in extreme contrast to the two other occupants of the van. Her shrill voice with its East London accent cut into their conversation. Well, if you'd spent more time fixing it and less time listening to that music of yours we might be better off now. Storm, I really can't see why we need to get out of the city. Just because you and your brother got some mystical message by post doesn't mean I have to leave the safety of my home. Storm glared at her. Well, Sharon, you don't have to come with us. You can go back now if you want to. We're only a few streets away. I invited you because you are my friend. Sharon laughed. I would like nothing better than to go back. Look at this place, this is madness. Look, it's been great, but I think I'll just wish you well and go back. Stop the van. Kyle's smile broadened and his face looked a little less furrowed. It would be a pleasure. He stopped the van and put the handbrake on. Storm jumped down onto the pavement. Sharon reached over into the back, grabbed her designer suitcase, and climbed down into the street. She hugged Storm, waved and disappeared into the crowd. As she turned a corner heading home, she was crushed under the falling debris from a building which was collapsing. Her suitcase skittered across the pavement and came to rest next to a fractured wall. Her body was lost under the masonry. Storm looked shocked. We have been friends for years, since school. Now she had just gone off into the night. I can't believe it. I hope she will be all right. Kyle looked at Storm in earnest as three youths ran from where they had been hiding in a building and headed for the van. Storm. Get back in quickly and shut the door. Storm leapt inside, slammed, and locked the door as the youths climbed onto the side of the van but fell off as Kyle drove off at speed. When they were a little further down the road and he could afford to lessen his concentration, he looked at her. Look, Storm, you have been acquaintances for years, not friends. When would you ever say she was a friend? We have never been anything other than her strange friends who validated her wish to be a little unusual. Did she give a moment's thought to your friendship when she encouraged James to be her lover because she thought he was your boyfriend when you were younger? Come on, she dumped him like a hot coal when she found out you two were just friends. Let her go. I'm not sure that wherever we are going would let her in anyway. She didn't get an invitation. Storm still looked sad. I know, she'll be fine. She always is. We've got to get going. Kyle ground the gears into action and put his foot on the accelerator, and the van struggled on, loyally carrying them through the chaos and falling masonry. It was long past its best, but the old-time workmanship held it together. The wheels turned and they moved on. After about an hour they were clear of the burning buildings as they came to the outskirts of the city, and the road became a little easier. The ash had stopped falling. There were still people wandering in the streets and some tried to thumb a lift, seeing the space in the van. Storm looked over at Kyler. Do you think we should pick someone up? Kyle looked thoughtful. Storm, if we open that door, we will probably end up dragged out ourselves. Also, who would we choose? It is going to be a long journey. I'm sure we'll find someone along the way. Storm went back to studying the map on her lap and tried to avoid looking at the pleading faces of the people they passed. Some were walking blank-faced, some sat on the side of the road. Some made an active attempt to try to get in the van. But Kyle kept driving. It was nearing dawn when Kyle passed the second petrol station. Like the others, it was in flames. Storm, this isn't looking good. If we don't get petrol soon, we're going to run dry. She's running on fumes as it is. Storm looked down at the map. This is no use. I've guessed where the petrol stations are, but there's no saying that they won't be in the same state as this one. Whatever that fire in the sky was must have ignited them. Perhaps we ought to look for somewhere to stop and try to find fuel another way. Shall we try to get to the countryside and see what we can find there? Kyle laughed. We could take petrol from cars that aren't working, but if we stop we're going to lose the van anyway. Look, I'm going to head to that location we were given. Perhaps if we get far enough away from the city we may be able to find a chance to stop and siphon some off. I really should have filled up when I got that voucher for half-price petrol out of the blue. Storm smiled. You can't look back on that now. What is done is done. Come on, we'll get as far as we can, and if we have to walk the rest of the way, we'll walk it. The buildings got sparser, as did the people, until they weren't seeing people along the way at all. The coating of carbon became just a fine dusting blown by the wind. They drove through the night, and finally when the city was far enough behind they were in the countryside. Patches of green still existed between the skeletons of the buildings, and the green increased as they left the buildings behind. They drove on 4 miles until the engine started to judder as they got to the dregs of the petrol at the bottom of the tank. They managed another couple of miles before the engine spluttered to a stop. There was hardly any ash about, just a little fluttering in the breeze. They had left the buildings behind, and the green leafy land ran in front and behind them. Kyle sat back in the driver's seat. So what do we do now? Storm smiled at him. We walk. Grab your backpack and we'll see what we can find. No point hanging around here, it's not as if we can call for rescue. Typical that we break down now where there are no abandoned vehicles. All it would take would be one, but that last car was miles back. Kyle smiled. There were too many people about. We would have lost the van. They slung their backpacks onto their backs, locked the van and started off down the road. The morning air, as dawn was nearly breaking, was crisp and chilled. Trees overhung the road, making it darker, and in the distance behind them they could see the red glow as the city burned. After a casual glance and a moment of reflection, they turned their backs on it and kept walking. A mile down the road they came to a country pub. Its pub sign was no longer illuminated, but as the sun was coming up they could just make out a black lamp. It was double-story and gabled. Black wooden beams crossed crisply painted white pebbled ash, and neatly tended colorful hanging baskets hung from brackets on the wall. It looked relatively unscathed, but it was hard to tell in the dawn light. They immediately noticed that there were lights in the windows, so they sped up. As they got closer, they realized that what they thought was electric light was actually from candles. Storm went to knock and then hesitated. What if they want to murder us? Kyle closed his eyes and opened them, taking a deep breath. Well, if we stay out here on the road, someone is going to run into us sometime. It can't hurt to knock. They could just tell us to go away. It is very late, or early, depending if you have been sleeping or waking up. Storm took a hold of the large black painted door knocker ring and knocked on the door. She jumped slightly as it was far louder than she had anticipated. It seemed to echo in the still morning air. A light appeared in the small window in the door, but it was soon obliterated by what they guessed was someone's head. A muffled voice shouted. What was the message? Storm shrugged, then a small smile of recognition flickered across her lips. She brushed back her long brown curls from her face and ran her tongue over her dark red lipstick. She straightened her jacket and coughed. Well, if you mean come to this location if you want to live, then that was the message we got. She looked at Kyle and grinned. I've read enough novels to know that when you are given a strange comment it just has to be a password or something. They heard the bolts being drawn back and the door opened and golden light created a reassuring bubble in the darkness. Enter, friend. Come inside. They stepped inside quickly and the door shut with an unnerving thud and was locked behind them. It was bright inside and warm. They hadn't realized how cold they had got until they felt the contrast. The disembodied voice belonged to a tall man in his mid-60s. For his age he was athletically built. His long grey hair hung in well-brushed waves and his rough weather-worn skin was slightly wrinkled in a rugged sort of a way. He had a kindly look of one who had seen too much and understood more. His steel-grey eyes looked them over. So you have come far. I'm Frank, by the way. Kyle shuffled his feet, looked nervous and looked the man in the eye. We came from the city. Our van ran out of petrol about a mile down the road. I'm Kyle. This is my sister Storm. Frank shook his head. I guess you ignored the not-so-subtle hint to fill up. You and the rest, don't worry, you are in good company. It was worked out that if you didn't, you'd end up here. This is probably all a bit of a mystery to you and you've had a hard night. You got here and for what it's worth you are safer now. We're all going to the location. If you had the message then you know we're being directed to a safe place. Kyle shook his head. Well, actually I wasn't that sure, but with no other really viable option it seemed the thing to do. I don't watch the news, so all of this came as a bit of a shock. Frank thought for a moment. It came as a shock to everyone whether they read the news or not. There was no warning, just the message you got, and not everyone got that message. What's in your car? Anything useful? Storm looked at him quizzically. We put all we could in there. Food, camping stuff, bedding. Frank leapt into action. He shouted. Brand, get out here. He turned back to them. Any supplies we can get can be the difference between life and death, and a working vehicle is worth just as much. Better not leave it out there for road pirates to get their hands on it. Thieving sods, just a bunch of kids, but they have a name now and they are going up and down the road stealing. They were nobodies before all this, now they are a flaming nuisance. Also, if you have a vehicle, we have a stash of petrol that Brand managed to get from a station before it blew. We will go and get your car. Kyle looked stunned. Yes please. Camper van actually. Frank smiled. Even better. The door behind him opened and the view of the room was almost completely blocked by Brand as he stepped through the doorway. They got a glimpse of a few people sitting at tables and at the bar. Brand was 6'6", broad-built, and his dreadlocks seemed to make him tower even taller. His woven cotton tunic with a hood and ripped jeans caught Kyle's attention right away. A surfer bead necklace hung around his neck. Frank smiled when he saw the three together. What is this, Surfer Central takeover? Brand's serious expression melted to a bright smile as he looked them over, evaluating them. He was heavy-built, his thick-set features broody. Storm couldn't help taking a quick intake of breath, which was not lost on Brand. He smiled at her. Hello, Frank, is there a problem? Frank gave Brand a very knowing look. Don't, just don't. Brand looked confused. Frank smiled. This couple have a camper van parked about a mile down the road. It's out of petrol, but they have filled it with useful stuff. Shall we go out and rescue it? Brand smiled and shut the door to the bar behind him. It opened immediately and a short-wave thin girl with long blonde dreadlocks bounced into the hallway. So, what's up? Oh, more people. Haven't we got enough in there already? She looked down her nose at them, giving Storm a wicked glare. Brand froze, his relaxed smile turning to a nervous sideways glance at the women. This is Chris. Chris smiled at them both and held out her hand. I'm Christabel, Brandon's girlfriend. She shook their hands with a firm and confident grip. So what do you need my man for? The emphasis was on my man and she was looking at Storm when she said it. Frank smiled at her. We need to go out and pick up these good people's van. Are you coming? Chris took a step back. I don't think so. It's not really my sort of thing. You can take Brandon with you though. I'm sure he will enjoy the fresh air. It will do him good. She stepped over and kissed him, all the time watching Storm's expression. Then she turned and went back into the room. Storm couldn't stop herself watching Brand. She could feel that she was fascinated by him. Frank chuckled slightly when they weren't looking. Well, Brandon, you had better do as you are told. It would be sensible that you came with us. This is Brand. Brand, this is Kyle and his sister, Storm. He emphasized the word sister. Brand took a step forwards. Pleased to meet you. He shook hands with them, lingering noticeably long when he shook Storm's hand. Where is this van of yours? We can go and get it back for you if you'd like to go inside and meet everyone else. Storm looked up at him. He was still holding her hand from the handshake. We'll come too. We can show you where it is and who knows, we might even prove to be useful. Or is it just men's work? Brand looked down at her and smiled. So you're the cheeky one, are you? No, it is not man's work. I just thought you might have had a long day. You are very welcome along. Frank smiled and coughed. Brand let Storm's hand go. Come on then. Let's get the beast in before the vultures start circling. You might as well keep your equipment. They stepped out into the morning chill. The sun was just beginning to rise as they set off down the road. Nothing stirred other than the occasional particle of ash which drifted on the wind. The road was empty and they got to the van with no difficulty. As Frank saw it, he gasped. This is perfect. A house on wheels. Thankfully we have a fair bit of petrol. This will be invaluable. He filled the engine enough to get it started from the can that Brand carried with him and moved some of the things off of the seat in the back so that everyone could get inside. They started it up and drove it back to the pub. When they got there, Brand opened a large shed door at the back and they drove the van inside. That should keep it hidden if we get any visitors. We're planning to hold up here for a day or two to let the confusion die down and to pick up any stragglers. Then we'll head out to the safe site. Did you want anything from the van or shall I lock up? We have rooms and blankets for you tonight. Do you need anything else? Storm smiled. No, I think we have pretty much all the essentials in our packs. You can lock up. Bran pulled the doors shut and slipped the large padlock through the bolt. That should hold it. He looked around cautiously. Nobody about. Good. We've been lucky so far, but I doubt we will be for much longer. We had better get inside as there is no point in tempting fate. What they can't see, they won't worry about. Brand led the way in, followed by Frank who had the front door key. They opened it and stepped inside, shutting and locking the outer door behind them. Brand opened the inner door, and they were hit by a burst of warm air smelling of alcohol and wood smoke which surrounded them with a welcoming caress as they stepped into the bar. It was a large room with a low ceiling and old oak beams. It had all the textbook features and fittings that any visitor would expect to find in a country pub, all neatly presented to look as though they had been there generations. It was difficult to tell if any of the beams were fake or real as the whole place looked like it had been recently painted. Horse brasses, other brass and copper decorations hung around the wall and there was a roaring fire in the fireplace. The bar and tables had been lit by candles and the heavy red velvet curtains were now drawn back. Behind the bar there was a slightly portly middle-aged man with steel-grey hair and a clean-shaven face. He was handing over a glass of wine to Chris, who sat on a stool at the bar. There was a pint waiting and the stool beside her was empty. Frank smiled. Brandon, I think you had better get over there. She wants to put your leash on again. Brand glared at Frank and pretended he hadn't seen Chris at the bar. He turned slightly towards the three men sitting by the fire. Recco, Matt, Steve, I've just been out to pick up these guys' van. Looks like our transport problem could be sorted. How are you getting on fixing up the van? Recco looked up from his lager and brushed something off of his black overalls. His Mediterranean olive skin, dark flashing eyes and long dark brown curls were complemented by his soft Italian accent that could make even a shopping list sound sexy. I've pretty much fixed her. She wasn't that broken. With a bit of tender loving care and just a few spare parts, easily found, she's good to go. Matt looked up from his beer. He was casually dressed in a loose cotton shirt and jeans. His white blonde almost albino features were a stark contrast to Recco's dark Mediterranean looks. He was stocky and looked as if he worked out. I managed to get some new tires. Just in time. The vehicle I borrowed them off of was torched just after. So I guess they won't be wanting them back anytime soon. Steve looked up. He was a slim-built, black-haired youth obviously in his late teens and far too thin for the overalls that he was wearing. A Londoner by his accent, a gleam in his eye. What he's trying to say is that he nicked them. That darned gypsy had that motor up on bricks before I knew what he was up to and had it on his toes with the wheels. Matt looked offended. It's not as if they needed the wheels. That car was fully computerized, so it wasn't going anywhere. Steve laughed. You take the bait so well. He took a long drink of his beer and settled back in the chair looking very pleased with himself. Brand laughed as well. Well, at least we have wheels. Let me introduce Storm and Kyle. They are joining us. He looked at them. Kyle looked at Storm, who smiled and nodded. Kyle looked back at Brand. We would love to join you. Is this everyone? Brand looked around the room. Yes, for now. You have met these three miscreants. This is Jerry behind the bar. He used to be police, but he's all right now. He retired here with his wife after retiring. We've got enough seats in the vehicles now, so hopefully we won't be gathering too many more people unless they have their own transport. Jerry nodded as Brand introduced him. He was a portly man in his mid-50s who had the bearing of a policeman. He had a presence, and his neatly trimmed platinum grey hair and beard harked back to his police days. His shirt was neatly ironed, and what could be seen of his black slacks were also ironed immaculately. He smiled in welcome, his blue eyes sparkling. Frank went over to the bar where Chris was perched on her stool with a face like thunder. Jerry, pint for me. I see Brand has his waiting, and whatever these two people would like. Brand raised his eyes to the ceiling as Chris glared at him. Come on, let us show you our hospitality. What would you like? He was looking over his shoulder at Storm as he spoke. Storm followed him, Kyle just behind her. I would like some red wine. How about you, Kyle? Kyle smiled as he watched Brand wander over and sit on the set that Chris was patting with her hand. I'll have a bitter if you don't mind. He put his hand in his pocket. Jerry smiled. There is no point in paying for it. We're packing up what we can of this little lot and taking it with us. I can't see me having to do accounts for the foreseeable future. Have these on the house. Storm sat down on a stool. Thank you, Jerry. That is much appreciated. It's been quite a day. Jerry smiled at her. I bet it has, and it will be another one tomorrow. Have we looked into how we can lock this place down? I know that it is morning, but I suggest we get some sleep and get ourselves sorted later to set off the day after. I don't want to come down here and find we've been raided. Security's more your expertise, isn't it, Frank? Any ideas? Frank looked around the room. I've been sorting that sort of thing out most of the night, on and off. We can barricade the doors in here just in case, and if we can shut the storm shutters, that will protect the windows, or are those just for decoration? Jerry looked bemused. Storm shutters. Frank went over to the window, pulled aside the curtain and unclipped the wooden shutters, which were folded back into the wall behind them. These storm shutters. It shows how much you dust in this place. We can shut all the window shutters, pulling the curtains over them, and the candles will provide light. Now won't that be a bit cozy? I've checked all the outside doors and they are locked. I've put planks across the back windows. I would assume you aren't going to be complaining about the nail holes, and I think this place is pretty much locked down. Frank sat at the bar. Everyone other than Jerry had gone to bed. Jerry had pulled up a stool on the other side of the bar, and the two of them had steaming cups of coffee. Jerry offered Frank the sugar, He shook his head. So as an ex-military man, how do you fancy our chances? Frank smiled. Our chances are very good if we are sensible. I would estimate that there will be an initial panic, but this will be sporadic in its actual effect, as people will believe that the computers will go back on and life will go back to normal. It is when they realize that this isn't going to happen, then the real trouble will start. I would imagine at this stage there would be mass panic and riots around the city and its environs as people demand that LexCorp solves the problem and nothing happens because it can't. That will lead to more looting if there is anything left, and no doubt the military will be called in. They will deal with it according to protocol, putting down any insurrection and getting people either back to their homes or into makeshift shelters. Whichever they put them in, they will probably impose a curfew. We should be outside their control zone by then if we aren't already. I would put money on there being gangs on the roads looking for people who have packed up and are moving out of the city. I would assume that they would think that people would have everything of value which they have with them. They will probably have vehicles loaded with valuables and food. I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but I have heard that with the increased control imposed anyway lately, these gangs have been springing up for a while now. They are now in a good position to exploit the situation. Most of their vehicles are older style anyway, and they don't rely on technology. In a couple of days, the military will probably have control back in the cities. That will give them a chance to try to intervene on the roads. I would anticipate they would do some sort of mass cleanup, a knee-jerk reaction to the problem in response to public outcry. They will have to do something drastic as there are no internet sites for the people to complain to. They will be out on the streets physically demonstrating. When they realize that there is no going back when it comes to computers and machines, it is going to get very messy. The cleanup will no doubt involve a considerable amount of firepower and probably a high innocent bystander casualty rate. That will give two messages. The first will be to the road pirates that crime doesn't pay, and to the general population that if they riot they will meet the same force. Order will be maintained on the roads. By roads I mean the ones close to the cities. Outside that area they aren't going to worry to start with. Not until the supply lines break down. Jerry took a long drink. Wow, so you really think it will go like that? Frank smiled. Probably not, but it is better to have a plan in your head of how you think things are going to go. That way you don't start going over and over the alternatives. Either way, if we stay that extra day, it will allow everyone to get to know each other better. Then they will be more likely to work together better. We need a coherent group. It might also gather up one or two latecomers or lost souls who would be better off traveling as a group. Jerry gave him a very knowing look. Frank frowned. What's that for? Jerry smiled enigmatically. You really think that Brand getting to know Storm better is going to make for peace on the journey? Frank smiled. Brand won't do anything however he may feel about Storm. Chris has already seen to that. She's told him she is carrying his child. Jerry looked stunned. How do you know? She hasn't mentioned anything. Frank shook his head. I'm a nosy old bugger who listens to conversations he is not supposed to when he hears things that are likely to cause a problem. That one won't. It will keep Brand in check whether it is true or not. Jerry raised an eyebrow. You think she is making it up? Frank smiled. I wouldn't put it past her, but it's a smart move. It was a bit convenient. She saw the way he reacted to Storm. Suddenly she's pregnant. My money is on that. If she isn't, she's going to do everything in her power over the next month or so to make sure that she is. He's off his guard, and she will probably convince him he doesn't need to take any precautions. She's smart for all her failings. Jerry swallowed hard. I'm glad she's not my enemy. Frank laughed and raised his glass. Here's to that. We'll get through this and hopefully get all of them through it too. If I'm right and we keep to the minor roads, we may even get to our destination with very little trouble. If I'm wrong, which is probably more likely,